what is the nature of this one who intercedes? And so, I've said this normally in regards to the deity of Christ. We let people get away with murder when we dialogue with them on the subject of the deity of Christ, because we never force them to give a positive presentation of who Jesus really is in light of the verses we're looking at. Most Christians allow themselves to be put into a completely defensive position where they're simply defending the deity of Christ, and they never go, hey, wait a minute. You just brought up that verse. What about your view? Your view doesn't fit this verse. How do you answer that? We normally become hyper defensive, and we don't put the shoe on the other foot. And the same thing is true with modalism. I haven't really talked about that very much. Normally it's in regards to the deity of Christ, but the modalist really has to try to fit this strange view of Jesus as two persons. And then, see, here's the problem is, after the resurrection, you have the coming of the Spirit. If that's the unipersonal deity, if that's the one who was the Father, who indwelt the Son, and is now indwelling us, then what happened to Jesus? I mean, what is Jesus now? Is he no longer the God-man? What's the nature of the mediator who is at the right hand of the Father and who together with the Father sends the Spirit? When you're a Unitarian modalist, this doesn't make any sense. And so we look, for example, at Hebrews chapter 9. Hebrews chapter 9, beginning of verse 24. For Christ did not enter a holy place made with hands, a mere copy of the true one, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. So again, the writer to the Hebrews, for his own reasons, utilizes the tabernacle, not the temple, as his prototypical, his typology. So the reality is the heavenly tabernacle, of which the earthly is just but a shadow, a representation. And so Christ enters into the holy place, which is into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Now, that makes perfect sense in a Trinitarian context. We have the Son eternally in the form of God, equal with the Father, does not consider the equality something to be held on to at all costs, lays that aside, death, even a death on the cross, highly exalted, given a name which is above every name. Now he enters into the presence of the Father in our behalf. His sacrifice is accepted, his sacrifice is completed, and so he now is the intercessor in the presence of the Father. Same picture you have in the book of Revelation, the Lamb standing as if slain. So that makes sense, but how does this work in modalism? And again, there's different brands. I didn't get the feeling that Shawn really has a fixed theology of any of this. But who is this one who appears in the presence of God for us? If you have the idea that Jesus was two persons, the Father and the Son is only the human being, so is this now only a human being who stands in the presence of the Father? Well, how is he in the presence of the Father if the Father has taken on the role of the Spirit, and the Spirit now indwells us? Nor was it that he would offer himself often, as the high priest enters the holy place year by year with blood that is not his own. Otherwise, he would need to suffer often since the foundation of the world. But now once, at the consummation of the ages, he has been manifested to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And so, again, this makes sense when we have a divine Redeemer who is truly divine, the Son. In classical modalism, the Son, well, in modern modalism, the Son is not divine. The deity that dwells in the Son, but the Son came into existence at his birth in Bethlehem. And I think, I sort of wonder if that's where Shawn gets confused and actually was like, well, you mean Jesus hasn't always been in flesh? And I was really struggling. And I guess I made a strange face toward the camera or something. Here, there, somebody photoshopped something. I saw a meme. I don't know. But I couldn't even follow what he was talking about. I've never heard anybody suggest that. Well, that's what Trinitarians have told me. Well, in all probability, that's what you misunderstood Trinitarians saying, not that Trinitarians actually said that. And inasmuch as it is appointed for men to die once, and after this comes judgment, so Christ also, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time for salvation without reference to sin to those who eagerly await him. And so the one who is coming is the one who will appear, who is the one who once offered himself to bear the sins of many. If the nature of Jesus has changed, this doesn't make any sense. Because very clearly, the one who will appear a second time for salvation without reference to sin, to those who eagerly await him, is the same one who had been offered once to bear the sins of many. If somehow Jesus has gone from being the God-man to just simply a man, then there is no second coming anyways. Even if you put it off to AD 70, it still wouldn't make any sense, which is, using the preterist thing. So there's just so many, there's so many problems when people try to argue that the doctrine of the Trinity is just some later accretion or something along those lines. They don't seem to realize the doctrine of the Trinity is what makes the theology of the New Testament. It's what you cannot connect the gospel and its effects with the nature of God without the doctrine of the Trinity. The gospel is Trinitarian. And you can't have the Christian gospel without the God-man. You can't have, and you can't have the God-man in a modalistic sense. They may say, yes, he was a man indwelt by God, but he was a man indwelt by God who was truly deity and who referred to his Father and distinguished himself from the Father and from the Spirit. And in the application of the gospel has a particular function, continues to have a particular function to this day as mediator. Makes me wonder, I don't know, and I don't know that I really want to spend time finding out. I certainly don't have the time to do it right now. But what does a preterist do with the intercessory work of Christ after AD 70? I don't know. But for Christians anyways, it's a beautiful truth. It is a vital truth. And I just don't see how anyone can maintain the biblical doctrine of the Trinity, the biblical doctrine of the gospel, without it being Trinitarian in its manifestation, in its very essence. It's just right there. And so, I think I did at some point say to Shawn when he was saying, well, I don't understand it. I said, well, my kids did. And, junior high school, it wasn't meant to be an insult. It's just the reality that that's not an argument. If I said to, I don't get the various forms of Buddhism, but my not getting it is not an argument against the various forms of Buddhism. And so turning around and saying, well, I don't get how Jesus can be the God-man. That's not an argument against it. Just it's an observation, but it's not an argument. You say, well, it should be simpler than that. Well, I'm sorry, but the very fact that God is eternal is pretty much beyond my experiential understanding. So that doesn't fly.